taxi, miss. Cheapest rates in Glen Cove.
Well, hello, how are you?
Well, I'm fine. How are you? And I might add, who are you?
Who am I?
Am I supposed to know?
Come to think of it, no, you're not supposed to know.
Let the movie speak.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Let the Movie Speak. I'm Travis,
I'm Justin.
and we have a returning guest. I'm going to just go ahead and say our favorite guest so far. Annie's back. How are you, Annie?
I'm doing well. Happy to be back.
Sweet. I hear this is your favorite movie.
I like it better than the one you lost.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Time to fess up, Travis.
Well, Lost is a very weird way of articulating.
You're
what
right.
happened.
You're right.
Okay.
Lost to thievery.
Yeah, exactly. This is part of the three. This is the last, actually. We're there, people. So congratulations and thank you to the two of you for coming back for more. This is the third of three robbery redos, as we're calling them, because all our equipment was stolen. And instead of redoing the third film in our series, we just swapped it out because you both thought it was garbage.
Well, you know.
And, in retrospect, I still kind of liked it. It was fine. But we'll never tell you what that movie was. It'll be a secret forever. It was in a lonely place. But today we're talking about a different movie with at least one of the same actors. I think only one of the same actors.
Yeah.
And it kind of jumps around the chronology of how we're going through. It's 1954 when that was a little earlier. But who cares, right, Justin? Because it's
Nobody cares.
you especially.
Right. Well, and all, when your greatest possessions have been deprived of you, Travis, and you've been just shelved to the sidewalk like a piece of refuse, like we have, you feel humble and grateful enough just to wake up and roll over and see your podcast equipment next to you and know, I can still carry on. I can still do this. So I think we're just both just boatloads of excitement to be here.
Boatloads. Sound like the boats might be a little on the small side for you tonight, but I appreciate the kind words and the imagery of you sleeping next to your podcast equipment.
The boats are canoeish, I guess.
Okay.
Maybe large kayaks.
Okay. I guess it's still technically a boat. Yeah.
Just enough to get podcasting gear in.
Right. So we're going to talk about 1954 Sabrina, which is a star-studded vehicle that I think lots of people have seen and lots of people like. And it was the first time I watched it. Was it the first time you watched it, Justin?
I don't remember because this is not a movie I would have enjoyed as a lad.
That's true.
So it is very possible that I have seen this before on one afternoon with my mother and TCM in the background. But
yeah.
I don't know. How about you, Annie?
We may get to this later, but the redo of this with
Yes.
Harrison Ford and Julia Ormond and Greg Kinnear's first starring role, came out when I was 16, and that made me prime demographic. And so I have...
Is it 95? 95. Is that one?
Sure.
I mean, I'm not trying to
No.
divulge your age. I'm just
No,
trying to
no,
get a
no,
sense
no,
of
no.
the kind of movie that this is. It's a 95 movie, isn't it?
Okay, so I was 17.
The kind of movie? What does that have to do with what year
Well,
it came out?
look, a 90s...
Well, it's not a 96, let me tell you.
No,
we're
we're
not
not
going to
talking
mistake
about-
it for a 94.
I'm just saying, it's a 90s movie.
It is a 90s movie.
Yeah.
And so with all of the discretion of a
Yeah.
mid-teen, I've really liked the redo.
Okay.
But my mom made me go back and watch this one, and I did not like this one.
Don't spoil anything yet, but okay.
But that was me at 17, so who knows what I think now.
A mere 5 years ago. Okay. All right. Let's get into what we watched this week. Annie, what did you watch this week? As the guest, you can go first.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk about two movies very briefly. One of them is a little flick you may have heard of called Citizen Kane.
Indie movie.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
My hot take is that Citizen Kane is a good movie.
Nice.
What I was impressed with when I saw it for the first time, like I think last week, was that it.
Oh, first time.
Yeah, like I've
Nice,
never
nice,
seen it
nice.
before. It it has that art house sensibility to it where you're really watching it for the framing and the shots and whatever else. But it also has a compelling plot and characters and people you care about. And there's so few movies I've seen that do both of those well.
Yeah.
And so I think that was what impressed me so much about Citizen Kane, and probably is why it, ranks, in the top 1, 2, 3 on most best of lists. So the other movie I watched recently was My Man Godfrey. And I thought I should mention it on this podcast because it's a William Powell flick, like The Thin Man. He plays the lead in The Thin Man. He's paired with Carol Lombard this time. And it's very much more like a slapstick romantic comedy. But it's good, it's fun, it's making some commentary, some social commentary that's interesting. But it's The Thin Man with just as funny and intelligent a script, except the female lead is stupid. like she's like Gracie Allen style dumb, but the film is smart. And so anyway, I really enjoyed it. It was fun. It was fluff. It was fun.
But you were
fluff.
like raised on those Thin Man movies, so it's hard. Yeah, it's kind of a high bar for like female co-leads.
Yeah,
almost.
But like they play her off as the fool like throughout. But anyway, I loved it even so. So if you liked The Thin Man,
give it a whirl.
Give My Man Godfrey a whirl.
Okay. And Justin, what did you watch this week?
Well, I sat the kids down for mandatory first-time viewing of The Sound of Music. Which, okay. I thought that was Led Zeppelin at first. I don't know what was going on.
That's what they sing in the song, The Hills. The Hills. The Hills Are Alive.
Hills Are Alive? Yeah. Yeah, there are some high soprano parts in this
sung exclusively by men, from what I've been told.
Right. Yeah. Actually, all of Julie Andrews' singing is dubbed over by I think it's Tony Bennett. Yeah. Anyway, just
uncredited.
We're not talking about that movie today. No, it's really kind of fascinating. Yeah, my hot take, like Annie's, is Sound of Music. Pretty good indie movie. No, but just to see, like that was a studio, that was a big production back then. I mean, and it,
oh yeah,
in the greatest sense, it really was. It just tells you how much cinema has changed, especially on that kind of scale today. I mean, it would just be laughable. To think that a movie like that would be a big Oscar-nominated and box office draw. But this is from a different era. This is from, that golden age of musicals. And so largely, I think the movie is still really rocking. But as we talked about in our little pre-game show here between the three of us, it's really long.
Yep.
I don't know that it's quite bloated, but it might exist in some kind of mist where it's possible you could run into bloated parts. And it does a strange, for a character that is supposed to be a nun or a one who is trying to take on the full umbrage of nunnage. It is interesting how theologically light that is. Maybe that's just my bias because I'm like a weird person that would probably rather watch like
Martin Scorsese's Silence.
Yeah,
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah,
than this, but yeah, it's just a little odd. But you can only fit so much into 3.5 hours, I guess.
Yeah, they were really short on time. They didn't have enough time to
they
get into that.
Didn't have a lot to go on. Kid actors have come a long way. Christopher Plummer really aged very gracefully.
Yeah.
And so has Julie Andrews.
He is straight up Foxy in that movie. That guy is so good looking. Like he's like a nice looking old man too. Like when he in his latter years. But man, I rewatched that. He looks like a different person, but just like super like movie star quality face.
Definitely.
It's kind of nuts. What's your favorite song? What's your favorite song, Justin, from The Sound of Music?
You go first while I think of my answer.
Edelweiss.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's basic, but it's good.
Yeah.
I saw a film clip just last week, and it was Julie Andrews was receiving some sort of award at some big, great event. And the people on stage start singing a medley of songs from The Sound of Music.
Yeah.
And then all around the room, I think it was 5 or 6 people who looked much older than her
Yeah.
just stood up in their seats and stood up, not in their seats, next to their seats.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, and started singing along, and all just made their way over. And it was the kids. It was the kids. And they were just scattered throughout
Wow.
the event. And she had no idea. And every single one of them looked 15 years older than her.
Because she aged like amazingly.
Well, I mean, she has the resources. So,
Fair enough.
but it was,
I was
anyway.
giving her a little bit of leeway there.
I don't know.
it
Is
brought
that
me to
all
tears.
resources? Because
It made me cry.
Audrey Hepburn of Sabrina fame,
Yeah.
she did not age as
No, she didn't.
I'd like to poke
gracefully,
Julie Andrews in
perhaps.
the cheek and find out. You know what I mean? Like if it,
Yeah,
if it's,
what's real?
if it snaps back or doesn't, you know what I mean?
Well,
Talk about
she's a
the bloated
singer,
parts in the
and
mist.
Singers their faces tend to, have more tone.
Rankle?
No, they look better.
Oh, they look better.
I think to answer your question, when I was a kid, I really liked Edelweiss the best. Apparently, my parents came home one day when I was a kid, and I was just singing Edelweiss.
You were normal.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Anyway, I think my favorite is My Favorite Things.
That's a good song.
But that probably has more to do with it being like a jazz standard now.
And how the crap did that turn into a Christmas song? Can anybody answer that question?
Stuff. It's materialism.
It says one thing about like spices in the winter or something.
No,
like,
there's packages tied up with string.
That's it. That's it. It's so weird to me that that's like a perennial Christmas song, and Tony Bennett of all people has like a cover of it
See?
that pops up on the radio.
It's all coming together.
Yeah, we planned. This is clearly all planned. All of these references. Okay,
Stick to the script.
I love Sound of Music too. By the way, it rules. It's the best version of what's that Julian the other musical we watched, Justin, with the trolley song that's so horrifying.
Meet Me in St. Louis.
That one. It's,
Oh, yes.
It's the much better version of that movie. Yeah. It has fewer pyres burning in the street and murderous children.
I mean, it
You
does.
know what,
It does
though?
have
You can-
murderous Nazis.
It does have Nazis.
Yeah.
It does.
yeah,
It does. It was a really good primer for my kids. They just started learning about World War II,
Yeah.
incidentally, in their curriculum. And so it was, again, just I'm following the
Timely.
script and
Nice.
tying all things together.
Right. So I got to work
but-
Nazis into my next thing. Okay, I'll do my best. I watched A Simple Plan, which is another 90s flick, I believe. Later 90s. Have you seen A Simple Plan?
Nope.
Okay. It's the
Yeah, I
same.
have.
You have, Justin? Okay.
Yeah.
I loved it. I thought it was really freaking great, actually. It's a Sam Raimi movie. And you may or may not know Sam Raimi as like, a horror genre guy. He did like the Evil Dead movies. And then most recently he did the newest Doctor Strange.
Oh, let's not talk about that. He did Spider-Man.
Yeah,
Let's just leave
Spider-Man.
it.
Yeah, he did Spider-Mans, all
Spider-
three of them. The
Spider-Mans.
original ones, Spider-Man. He did all three of them. Anyway, this is sort of in the period of his career where he was like, I'm going to do some like serious dramas. And then he got a little bit of like acclaim and awards, like buzz or whatever. And this is one of those movies in that run, but the cast is really good. It's Bill Paxton is the lead. Billy Bob Thornton in one of the most incredible supporting roles like I've ever seen, and he got an Oscar nomination for it. And it is like a Coen Brothers movie that they never made.
Yeah.
Which isn't surprising because Raimi and the Coens like lived in an apartment together when they were coming up through the ranks and making movies and stuff. Anyway, if you like Fargo, it's like a total spiritual sequel to something like Fargo, where people make very bad decisions and you're like, oh gosh, please don't do what you're about to do. But also it's kind of funny and it has good things to say. So I would strongly recommend A Simple Plan. I feel
Great
like
ending, too, I think.
Oh my
Very
gosh.
strong
Such a
third
good
act.
ending. Yeah. And it's one of those movies that almost doesn't exist anymore. Like people forget, I think, about it a little bit.
Right. Like Sound of Music.
Like Sound of Music. No
And
one
Nazis.
is. Years later, people are like, this movie meant nothing to us. It has no legacy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
When's the next Marvel thing?
that's it. Okay, Justin, we said Christopher Plummer had a movie star face, right? Back in the day,
Yes.
at least. Well, you know who else
Yes.
had a movie star face, according to the times he lived in, was a man who starred in one of my favorite movies called In a Lonely Place. His name is Humphrey Bogart, and he's in the movie we're talking about today, Sabrina from 1954. So as I said, for me, this was a first time watch. Justin, it's like one of those ones that was probably around, but you didn't like pay attention to it a ton when you were younger.
Yes.
But I've heard good things from most people who've recommended I watch this. And then when I started watching it, Justin, I didn't do any like pre-research. I just sort of put it on. But I was happy to see that it was a Billy Wilder flick, and based on Sunset Boulevard, at least, and I guess another movie that's coming up this season later. I was like, oh sweet, this probably won't stink. So this is directed by Billy Wilder, written by him, Samuel Taylor, who I think wrote the play that this is based on and helped adapt it for the screen, and another guy named Ernest Lehman. Logline is, a playboy becomes interested in the daughter of his family's chauffeur, but it's his more serious brother who would be the better man for her. That's kind of a lame logline, actually.
It's really good when you read it that way, though. I feel like your inflection really sells it.
Well, my doubt increased as I went along. Anyway, the background of this basically is this is a bigger budget studio picture, kind of a crowd pleaser style, as well as it got Oscar buzz and nominations and was nominated for 7 different things and won an Oscar. So definitely critically well received, made plenty of money, and it's kind of star-studded. You know, the cast are clearly big names. So we already talked about our relationship to the movie a little bit, but Annie, I'm curious to know, on your rewatch, anything pop up that was different for you this time than back when you first watched it?
It's been a while. So I have to dig.
5
whole years since 1995. I think probably this time I understood why I didn't like it. I think when I watched it so long ago, I just kind of, it left a bad feeling. But this time I know.
Was it indigestion?
Yes. At this time I was just kind of grossed out by a few parts. I mean, this is not a terrible movie.
Yeah.
But overall, I probably won't be seeking it out for my own enjoyment in the future. Which just jumped to the end of your podcast, but there you go.
Okay, so I think this is going to come up, and Justin, correct me if I'm wrong. I'll pass the baton to you here. There may or may not be 1 or 2 hurdles that, if you can't find your way over those hurdles, this might be a tough movie to enjoy. Is that how you experienced it?
Yeah, and for me, it's not really. Although I think I'm trying to pick up what Annie's laying down there, and I think one of those things that I imagine she and I are, assuming that we're on the same page here, are probably not the only people that have a qualm with this. Is just an incredible age disparity between Audrey Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart. Of course, she's in her mid-20s, he's in his mid-50s. And while, if we can appropriate the Jurassic Park little, saying, love can find a way, it's not like no one that is 30 years older than someone else has never gotten married and maybe they truly could be in love. It's a really odd choice, in my opinion, especially for this era of Hollywood, because Hollywood was already doing this kind of stuff regularly, as I think we're going to see Travis soon again coming up in another movie with Gary Cooper and Grace Kelly. And so it's not really, it's not like pushing the envelope. It's like, what makes this movie more unique is the movie actually is nice enough to admit what it's doing.
Yeah,
there's a whole subplot sort of about the age disparity, or at least there is some attention given to that fact that is just really freaking obvious, even if you don't say anything, though.
Yeah.
It doesn't, so I think for me, the power that could have is really diluted, one, by just the script, which I'm not trying to, it is not a comment on like the weakness or the strength of the script on its own legs.
Yeah.
But rather, as it just has to do with that specifically. It's not really addressed in a way that makes it meaningful any more than just sort of telling the audience like, hey, we get it. We know he's old, but get over it. Right. And so for me, that's it is definitely a hurdle and does make it not really a movie that I'm dying to rewatch anytime soon.
Got it.
And I think one of the other issues is that we were talking about Christopher Plummer, and Christopher Plummer was, incredibly handsome, but he aged. He kind of hit that several decades where you really didn't know how old he was. He was just,
Right.
kind of ageless for
He
a long
looked
time.
middle-aged for a while.
Yeah, and so there was a large Humphrey Bogart. He looks old. He's in his 50s and he looks it, if not looking older than he is.
It's not the years, it's the mileage.
It's not just that he's in his 50s, but that he's every one of those years is carved into that face.
He's a little used up. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to say some things and then I'm going to just leave them out there for people to respond to. I assumed as soon as this story started developing, as soon as he's like, well, I better distract her and, try to at least pretend to make her love me for, business reasons or whatever. We should probably lay out some of the plot so this makes sense to listeners. But you've got basically 3 main characters in the story. Sabrina is the chauffeur's daughter. The one thing this movie I think does kind of say interestingly is some stuff about class, because they give a lot of screen time to obviously the title character, but also the chauffeur, her father. And so they live on site of this mansion from this family that owns some big corporate business that does business things. And she lives kind of in the shadow of the wealth, and she looks on and has this like lifelong attraction to the younger of the 2 brothers, who's played by William Holden, who, Justin, we last saw in Sunset Boulevard.
Yes, sir.
And one thing I really like about this movie in particular is, aside from Audrey Hepburn, who I think is solid in this movie, but she's very much cast in an Audrey Hepburn like mold.
Yeah.
This role is not like breaking the world. It's not like crazy out of type for her. I think the other 2, at least based on my last William Holden viewing, these are like wildly different than you normally see these 2 guys playing, which I found really fun. Just from a viewing standpoint, as a nerd who watches a lot of movies, it's like you normally watch a Humphrey Bogart movie and you get the guy from In a Lonely Place or The Big Sleep or Maltese Falcon. It's that Sam Spade kind of archetype. And like, he's still Humphrey Bogart, but like, I like the casting against type as far as the type of person he is. So she falls for the younger brother, and, he doesn't even know she exists. She goes away to Paris, and we'll talk about Paris because the depiction of Paris in this movie is, shall we say, small in scope. And then she comes back a transformed, beautiful, elegant, sophisticated woman, tries to woo this man, and then this whole kind of like farcical kind of comedy of manners-esque thing plays out where he does see her, right? He does recognize her because now she's pretty and sophisticated, but he can't because he's got to marry this other woman for business reasons. So then Humphrey Bogart tries to woo her. That's the story. And it is definitely a romantic comedy. There's some dramatic things that happen in it, especially in the opening 15 minutes, which we can touch on whenever. But that's the gist of the story. So you've got Humphrey Bogart, older, wiser, businessy brother, younger brother who's a total like womanizing, immature, 3 times divorced, I think they say, or something like that. So what I think about the age disparity, this is what I was trying to get to. I think the fact that it's referenced makes it totally like I can swallow it, right? And I'm not saying that because I would recommend at all times mid-50s-year-old people would pursue mid-20-year-old folks. I'm just saying I like him in the role. I like her in the role, and the fact that they multiple times bring it up makes me think that like the story serves it up as an unlikely pairing, and I don't see the story arc as a creepy predatory thing that's happening. It's definitely opportunistic, but that's the hurdle, right? So like if I could step over that hurdle and I'm not like, okay, I don't feel gross watching this, then I think it's a really enjoyable movie. Like, I think it's funny, and I especially like the really kind of wacky stuff that happens in it. I think it hits those notes pretty well. And I think William Holden is really good in this. Like, he's not likable ever, but he's definitely not the guy he is in Sunset Boulevard, stony and sort of like brooding and all of those things. So I like the movie. I might be the only one who gives it like the positive sort of review, but I'd love to hear why you don't, because I'm interested.
On the note you just brought up, because there is another topic we can get to later.
Yeah.
I think there's
Is it
one,
when she tries to kill herself in like the first 10 minutes?
And
Okay.
it's played for comedy.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's not A+ material, I will say.
well, what's funny is I actually had to go look it up because I started watching this and I'm like, I get to that scene and I'm like, I don't remember this.
Yeah.
I don't remember Julia Armand trying to kill herself.
Yeah.
And they cut that when they remade it in the 90s. They just cut that whole section, which
Too edgy for the 90s.
good for them. But there's the scene when Audrey Hepburn is waiting on the tennis courts to be wooed the way that the William Holden character has wooed dozens and dozens of women before her, and she has watched from the shrubbery while he did so, which, okay. And then the older brother shows up instead, having injured his brother, so his brother couldn't show up.
We got to talk about how, but we'll get to it.
And he starts wooing her, but the first time he kisses her, he says, like, she looks surprised, and then he goes, "It's all in the family."
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Here's a kiss from David," and kisses her again. And then when she looks surprised and doesn't quite know what to do with that, he goes, "It's all right. It's all in the family." And that's the scene.
That makes it creeptastic to you.
Yeah, that's the piece where.
Yeah. I can see that. I don't love the line.
That's where it gets predatory in my mind.
I can see that, and I don't love the line. I didn't read that as predatory, but I could absolutely see how somebody would. But to me, it's like, again, that's a hurdle. It's early on. It's before they've ever gone out and like developed any kind of relationship. And so, like, if you were to take that line out, or even the kiss out altogether, I wonder how differently it might play, even with the age disparity.
What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm kind of right in the middle on that one, between your guys' perspective. Because watching that, it's more offensive to me in just a writing kind of way, because he says it like 3 times, and it's like, it wasn't an amazing line to begin with. So I don't know why it got repeated to the third power. And I agree that it does, at worst, the worst kind of reading, which is totally valid, that you can make from that, is he is being a freaking creeper, which is not a good look either, and is hard to overcome once something like that is in the movie. But I kind of chalked it up more to just really brutal writing. I don't know if you guys heard this, but supposedly while writing the script for this movie, Wilder started shooting before the script was done.
Yeah.
And so the poor scripter is working, during night and the morning and trying to get it to Billy by noon, and then Billy shoots the scene in the afternoon. So not ideal writing conditions.
You feel it in moments like that. I feel like you're saying, they may have liked that line and committed to it, but he does say it at least twice in that moment, and it's like, that seems like they forgot to cross it out or something.
Right. Yeah, and it's just, I do agree that the kiss it's strange. It just, to me at least, my reading is not, I don't take it as a predatory thing. I just take it as a really weird, just shouldn't have happened. Just a bizarre kind of choice that, I don't know, I guess when the dailies come in, they're like, hey, let's use the one where he doesn't do that. And they're like, well, sorry, Humphrey Bogart dropped a cigarette on it or something, so we can't use it anymore. So yeah, that's my amazing insight into that moment.
Let's talk about Audrey Hepburn's character and maybe the arc a little bit, because she's Sabrina. They say Sabrina, like, that's another one of the things in the final like sequence in the boardroom. I know they're saying it kind of for laughs, but they do say Sabrina a dozen times, and you're like, that's the name of the thing. It's another one of those moments where it's like, okay, they wrote that 8 minutes ago. What do we think about Audrey Hepburn in this movie? Character, performance, clothing?
Well, there's a lot to cover there. When I was watching this, one thing I thought about her character, especially her love for the younger brother.
Yeah.
It reminded me of what one of you, I think maybe Travis, said about the characters in Wuthering Heights, whereas these people are only in love because this is the only person they've ever known.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's true for Sabrina, because even when she goes to Paris, the only man who pays any attention to her is like
the old Baron.
Is the old Baron who's in his 70s.
And did you recognize the old Baron?
I feel
Travis?
like I half did, but I couldn't put a finger on it.
Is it Marcel Dallo?
Yes, who was in The Grand Illusion, Travis. He was the Jewish lieutenant in the
There
French
we go. Okay. Yeah. He had that, like, I know the face, but I couldn't place it. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, distracting. Please.
No, but it just
continue.
reminded me what like I said, I think Travis said in Wuthering Heights, which is like, this is just obsession because
The shallowness of it.
is this is the only young-ish man, although, you know, she's a teenager and he's in his 30s, so there's that.
It was 2 years, so she was like super early 20s, right? They say she went to Paris for 2 years, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
But
and
basically a teenager.
Yeah. And so that's what it that's one thing I thought.
Okay. Yeah, I think, well, and I think that's true, right? Like, if you just take any amount of time to compare him to any other man on earth, right? He's a bad person. He's just like, he's shallow and womanizing and, you know, kind of good looking, you know, but like mostly just gross, you know? And so I think you're right. I think without a baseline of decency, there's just like a guy in an expensive suit dancing with beautiful women at a party. And yeah. And so, okay. So then she goes to Paris, right? Her father sends her away. I skipped it. Hold on.
Oh, yes.
She's supposed to go to Paris. And she's so stricken with grief because David, of course, he won't bat an eye back at her. So she writes her little farewell note, and then she goes down into the garage and starts 8 different cars and tries to kill herself. But what made me laugh, and I don't think it was supposed to, maybe it was supposed to, she's like, she starts all the cars, and then she like kind of lays down like she's just gonna die, and then she's like, oh, smoky in here, and she opens a window. That's like, that's not how it works. And then Humphrey Bogart comes and discovers
No, I
her.
think you're supposed to laugh. I think you're supposed to think, oh, what a silly little girl.
Yeah.
She's overreacting. You know, how adorable and ridiculous. Like, and like the whole thing where like she turns the Jeep on and it starts like
And she
shaking
goes,
and rattling,
"Shh,"
and she's like, shh. Like that's supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you have a young woman
Trying
trying to kill herself
Yeah.
because the man she, you know, is interested in doesn't know she's alive.
Yeah.
Like that's not.
Justin, how'd you
Funny.
take the attempted suicide?
With a barrel of laughs, guys. Yeah, you know, I guess it didn't maybe rub me with as strong of a conviction, maybe. I think that's just because if there was any, I would have a way different viewing on if a scene like this was in, say the script is written a different way, and at the end of the movie, when she realizes, oh, you know what, it's better if I don't pursue David at all, I see what I'm doing, then she has an attempted suicide scene. Then it's like, what the heck? None of this is funny.
Yeah.
But there is no real, for me at least, for whatever my opinion's worth, there's no dramatic tension at all with that happening in like the first 10 minutes. Because if she dies there at the end, it's like, you know, that kind of art house did not exist in Hollywood then and still doesn't really now. So I don't know. To me, just because there's no real stakes, I don't believe as a viewer that it is even possible.
Yeah.
It's a different commentary than what Annie mentioned. I don't mean to take away from that at all. That I think there is an interesting conversation to be had about what that says about gender roles in 1950. What year is it, guys? 53?
4.
Okay.
Yeah, they're filming in 53.
and just expectations of masculinity and femininity. But just as on a less cerebral maybe, or just more as an entertainment kind of viewing. I did find it humorous for what they were trying to achieve, though maybe not perhaps to the level that would have been common or that was intended for the original audience.
I agree with you that there's no stakes. Like,
there's no stakes.
You never think she's that she's actually in danger, and the immaturity of her suicide note is makes that clear.
That's the point. I was just going to say the immaturity is the only thing they're trying to drive home, right? It's like they're depicting pure melodrama and, like you said, pure like single-minded focus, like being infatuated with this man who's maybe the only man she's ever had the opportunity to be infatuated with. There are other ways to write that. There are other ways to establish your character as needing to go away and find independence and find a place that makes her happy and turn her into a fully formed woman, independent and whatever. I do think like going to, I'm going to kill myself in a garage is like needlessly dark and probably not as funny as something else might have been. Like, what if she just decided to run away and, you know, somehow failed at that or something? I don't think the movie sets her up to look stupid most of the time, but that is a moment where you can't help it. Like, you know, you look dumb when you don't know that you're going to get smoke in the room when you start 8 cars. So anyway, she fails because Humphrey Bogart comes and finds her and says, "Oh, you silly girl. Better get back up to your room." She goes to Paris. Talk to me about Paris, people. I've never been to Paris, but I assume...
Well, it was shot on location, actually. As you can clearly tell, the Tour Eiffel is in the background there of the cooking school.
It is.
And a totally non-stereotypical, very accurate. They just took this guy off the street. Actually,
right. He wasn't even a real actor. They just found this guy. Yeah.
No, they just found him from a restaurant, which there are millions of in Paris.
Yeah.
It is also. I think it's shooting for a similar kind of vein of comedy or the same kind of level or wavelength of laughs as the suicide scene we just talked about.
Yeah.
It's just it's pretty goofy. Again, it's kind of, it serves a few purposes, right? Of kind of showing her transforming or going through metamorphosis. And then also, just kind of there's a beauty and a romance that is always implied, never really shown in Paris, and in, I guess, France at large. But really all that we're left with as far as a visceral or any kind of actual substantive or kind of evidence based data to take with from what we were shown of Paris is just all kind of clownish. You know, even the guy that takes interest in her, the Baron, he is old and he just looks goofy. I mean,
I've been watching you for some time. He's like a caricature of an old man. It's really weird. Annie, correct me if I'm wrong. You lived in Paris?
Yeah.
Okay. You got to tell, you got to reveal. Is this depiction of Paris much at all like your experience living in that city?
I'm not even going to deign to answer that question. Like, that's just an insulting question. I said to Travis earlier today that I preferred the 90s version of this movie, and that may not be a popular take. But this scene right here is why. Is because in the 90s version, she goes to Paris, but she goes to become a fashion photographer. Okay. And it is played for laughs. Like at her first shoot, a model loses a contact, and this is back in the days of hard contacts when they were like made of glass or something similar. And, you know, she accidentally steps on it. And so, you know, this is, you know,
it's embarrassing moment.
It's embarrassing, and she's a klutz and haha. But through her time in Paris, she becomes accomplished and known. She becomes an independent person.
And you see more of it.
And even when she comes back to New York, she has made a name for herself as a photographer.
Okay.
I really love that they made her a photographer and not a model.
Okay.
You know, but I feel like the 90s version of this just gave her so much more independence and agency, which then when the old man is interested in her, it makes more sense.
Gotcha.
Than Audrey Hepburn, because Audrey Hepburn, maybe she learned how to cook and turn like saltines into a souffle, which I still don't understand what that is.
Must be a thing.
It could
somewhere.
happen.
But that was one of the pieces where I think that made the 90s version more
just more meat on the bone in that part of the story.
There's just it just makes, I think it solves a lot of problems that the 50s version has.
I'm going to take that answer to mean this is exactly like Paris in real life. This is what it's like to live there. Justin, what did you...
You know, there's one part though that I think this movie does. There's a lot of things I think actually this movie does well, but with regards to the Paris thing, one thing that the movie is trying to achieve, I think, is to show that Sabrina is growing, and really, even though Linus ends up falling in love with her, and the other brother David. Ends up sort of having like a surprise sort of arc at the end that maybe we can get into a little later. The real character that has the arc is the titular character. And the first evidence I think you see of that is this shot where she's writing the letter to her father while La Vie en Rose is playing in the background. And the first shot, in my opinion, is the shot that Wes Anderson uses in every single one of his movies. It is framed in exactly the same way, where the character is, whoever your actor is completely and perfectly centered, and everything on the set design for that character's room, because they're usually interior shots, is perfectly manicured, and everything is placed just as it should be. So you get this really interesting placement of, I'm blanking on the words. Props. Thank you. Props and people are all kind of playing the same role. Everything kind of becomes a prop in the way that he frames things.
It's like a still, and it's super symmetrical, like a frame.
Yes,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And so, for me, that's where it's like, wow, I wonder if this is one of those shots that may have influenced Mr. Anderson. But different than Mr. Anderson, Mr. Wilder just chooses to zoom in from there. Mm-hmm. And as she's writing the letter, and I think for all the lack of really getting to know Paris, that this movie seems very uninterested in actually cluing the viewer in on how a place like that could change somebody. The movie does do, I think, a good job just by Wilder's choice of camera movement to show that the real growth is happening internally, and it's the it's the theater of the mind. And so I don't know. That was one shot or sequence rather that I thought did communicate what the rest of Paris Time really failed to.
I don't know about you guys. I learned how to crack an egg the right way so many times. So I thought
it's on the wrist.
Yeah, it's all on the wrist. Also, it's kind of violent. He was like, wham, when he cracked the egg. And I was like, okay, I've been doing this wrong for a long... I got chickens in my backyard. I'm cracking fresh eggs, baby. And I got it all wrong. So
you got to practice.
Okay, I did not at all absorb the things that you did in watching that shot, but I love your take on it. And what I think is funny is I'm watching her come back from Paris. Okay, let's get back past the crazy chef stuff and get back to her in the States, I think. I had flashbacks to, there's this joke in a movie where like there's this nerdy girl who's like super frumpy and she has like overalls and glasses and a ponytail. And it's like a comedy movie, right? And this other character is like, we got to turn you into the belle of the ball, And so like she comes in and the two things she does to her are takes off her glasses and takes out her ponytail. And then it's like, oh my gosh. And so like, there's a little bit of that going on here. Where
there's a lot of that going on here.
Where like she comes back and she has like a haircut, which I really appreciate that this movie acknowledges, right? Like her character, part of her arc is literally saying near the end, like, I didn't really gain anything or grow. I'm just basically got a new haircut. I think that's so like prescient. Like I didn't expect it to do that. I didn't expect it to mention the age discrepancy as much. I didn't expect it to go there in that scene with Humphrey Bogart. But like, I was hoping like other people felt that way because she comes back and like literally he's in the car with her. And like her face is in fact her face. And he's like, I just can't quite place it.
Well, I just think it's hilarious that we're expected to believe that this womanizer has been living on the same property with Audrey Hepburn in a very cute ponytail and bangs.
No, she looked disheveled and horrific.
Yeah, no, she's adorable.
She's basically Cinderella before the pink dress.
And anyway, this idea that William Holden wouldn't notice Audrey Hepburn because her hair was in a ponytail is
pretty funny.
It is funny.
It's pretty funny. Yeah. And she's just like toying with him in the car. And she's like, oh, I'm having way too much fun. And I'm just like, what is going on here? Anyway, the movie spins itself into this, like I said, like she's still interested in David. So Humphrey Bogart has to distract her and try to make her fall in love with him. I want to talk about the comedy for a minute because I think it's, to me, the thing the movie gets most right, like most consistently. It absolutely knows what it is when it's goofy. And there are, like, I don't laugh out loud at movies this old this often. And I don't mean that, like, I watch a lot of old movies, but, like, I just don't think that the average audience goer in, like, the 50s or 40s or even 30s was expected to guffaw. You know, I think it was a little bit more mannerly, a little bit more like, oh, it was a funny movie, but we all just kind of sat there and chuckled and mumbled through it, right? I laughed out loud several times throughout this. And the two things I want to highlight, and if anyone wants to comment on these or bring in other goofy moments that worked, I really like the scene where all of the house like orderlies, like the maids and people are sitting around while he's reading the letter from her. And every line they're reading it, someone else in the background, the dad's reading like a line and he's like, well, I'm having a great time here in Paris. And they go, that's good. He's like, but I can't stop thinking about David. That's bad. And they do it like 6 times.
Yeah,
It feels like very modern cadence, like snappy, good joke writing. And then the second sequence is the olive thing. I think that's freaking amazing.
At the very end.
Not quite.
Oh.
The first time, the dad is trying to just get the olive out of the tiny olive glass, and they cut back to him like a dozen times. He tries like 100 different things. He steals, I think he steals his pen and like bends it into a weird shape, and then he finally just pours his entire martini into the olive jar. And then, the olive thing comes back to you at the end. So I just think the slapstick, the physical humor in this, especially the dad character, he nails it. It's really funny stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah, I really enjoy the scene where David has this habit of sticking 2 champagne flutes in his back pockets in order to sneak off to the tennis courts with whoever he's seducing that night.
Doesn't that seem like too much work?
Yeah,
you got 2 hands.
Yeah, no, but I think the idea is that he's like 1
hand for other purposes.
No, goodness, no.
He's creepy. Come on.
No,
Totally
he's trying to get through the crowd without it being obvious that he's going to go meet someone in the dark.
He's holding a bottle of champagne.
Okay. Well, anyway.
Okay.
Anyway. His older brother is aware of this tendency. And so I just love the scene where the Humphrey Bogart character, Linus, is trying to put his brother out of commission and like tricks him into sitting down, like gets him worked up enough that he forgets that he has champagne flutes in his back pockets. And then like Humphrey Bogart keeps going, take a seat. Yeah. Take a seat.
Everything he's saying is just to try to get him to sit.
And just so that he sits on and then ends up having to, have glass picked out of his rear. I think that scene's really funny. And I honestly think watching Greg Kinnear and Harrison Ford do that same scene.
Oh, they do the same thing.
It's the exact same thing. Like they do.
Is Greg Kinnear the younger brother and Harrison Ford's the older brother? Okay.
Yeah. And so Harrison Ford and Greg Kinnear do that same scene really well.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. I think the funniest line in that exchange is when he's literally having glass shards picked out of his butt.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, how are we going to know if we got them all? Well, we'll reassemble the glasses, of course. Like any self-respecting doctor would use these methods. Justin, how about you? How did the slapstick tickle your fancy? Did you like that?
Yeah, there's a couple things. One, actually, I don't know if either of mine choices for moments that I laughed out loud that you guys haven't covered already are necessarily slapstick. But when Linus takes David before their father, and they're kind of trying to upbraid him at the very beginning when their father becomes aware of this.
Yeah,
his father brings up David's previous marriages, and David, much to William Holden's credit, I think, he starts arguing like a teenager argues with their parent about like, I want to borrow the car for the night. And he's like, Dad, I made 3 mistakes. It's just the delivery of that is really delightful, I think.
Yeah.
My other choice would be the boardroom at the end when Linus says to Grandma Walton, pre-Grandma Walton, hey, get the smelling salts ready.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay. And he says, you'll know when. And then, as soon as everyone gets in there, he's like, gentlemen, I have an announcement. No, not yet.
He's so good. That's what I'm talking about. Against type. This is not the kind of comedic, like snappy delivery. Like Bogart doesn't have jokes normally. He's got like comebacks and he's got witty, isms and whatever. But like, that, especially in that moment, Justin, I absolutely was like, he can do that. Like, and it's weird that he didn't have the opportunity to do it more.
Okay, so I don't know if either of you two can shed some light on this aspect of the movie, but Travis, earlier you alluded to different aspects of Audrey Hepburn's presence in this movie, one of those things being her attire. her wardrobe. And so as I was doing research into this version of the movie, I found the internet and elsewhere.
Found the internet?
I found the internet. It was
Throw it
a
away.
real moment of clarity. I was in
should
the
run.
library.
You should
Just
run,
I kept
yeah.
checking out all these books, and the librarian was like, "Are you aware, sir? We have these things called computers." And I went, "Huh?" And yeah, it's been a real awakening. So in finding the internet, I found there's niches on the internet, and one of those niches is devoted to this whole arena of Miss Hepburn's wardrobe. But being a guy, just a very simple man, I can't really tell the differences between dresses, women's things. It's all a mystery to me. And so all I do know is that when I see Hepburn in certain attire, certain dresses, I know enough to say, that's different, but that's about as deep as I can go. So can anyone does anyone have anything to say about those things?
Annie knows things and I don't.
All right. I do find it amusing that you all.
I just don't know things.
No. I believe you.
I don't know
I
things.
believe that you're ignorant. But I mean,
Softballed that one in there.
yeah, you did. What our dear listeners might not know is that you two are both stylish gentlemen when you want to be.
Swanky dressers is what she's trying to say.
So you are not quite as ignorant as you may be purporting to be, but there is something different going on here. And Audrey Hepburn is bringing in one of the classic 1950s silhouettes. When you look at the other women at these fancy, dances that the family is throwing, they're all in a silhouette, a style of dress that would be similar to like the Disney princess look, where you have the tight bodice, often strapless, and then you have just the giant circular ball gown.
The poofy bit.
Yeah. And but then when Audrey Hepburn shows up at the party in her brand new French gown, the silhouette is the same, but it's made very differently, where she has the same tight bodice, but then she has essentially a pencil skirt, all in the same color, a pencil skirt going, all the way down past her knees with beautiful embroidery. And then she has a huge, I'm going to call it a bustle, because I don't
Big poofy bit.
but that comes all the way around her hips. And so, like, if you actually look at her silhouette, it's the same as all the other women, but it is, leaving very little to the imagination as far as her actual shape. And so she becomes the poster child of Givenchy, the French fashion house. They work in partnership for the rest of Hepburn's life, and Hepburn writes that into her contracts.
Yeah.
That Givenchy or maybe a couple other French houses are going to dress her. But even in the dresses that we see earlier, before she goes to Paris, she's just in those dresses that come so tight around her tiny little waist, but then, flare out in the skirt. And so that is the silhouette of the 50s. And Hepburn's one of the ones who kind of pioneers that. Also, we see at the end, she shows up at the office to meet with Linus, and she is wearing, very form-fitting pants. I think they call them cigarette pants or something. Just the idea they're just, we might call sticks. And, she's wearing a great big coat, and, Linus says, "Let's go out to dinner." And she kind of opens up her coat to show that she's wearing these pants. And she says, "Well, we can't go anywhere. I dressed like this intentionally so that we couldn't go anywhere." And he goes, "You're right, you can't." And then she makes him a souffle out of saltines.
Make me a sardine saltine souffle. Yum, yum. Yeah.
So she is actually making some pretty strong statements with fashion, and it's impressive.
And it's apparent, right? Even like, I don't know all of the French things, but I noticed things looked like incredibly designed, like really stylistically bold, and she looks good. Humphrey Bogart looking good in this movie too, guys. I just got to say, I think it's a good look for him. I'm going to say it one more time.
Well, the other
It's
thing,
all in the family.
I'm going back to...
It's all in the family.
Gross.
I'm sorry.
I'm going back to Audrey Hepburn's look for a second, especially at that big party where she comes out with the huge dress. It is hilarious because the girl gets off a train with like 2 suitcases. And then she goes,
and a dog.
Oh, and a dog.
His
and
name
she goes,
is...
"I don't care."
David.
Oh, that's right.
It's kind of funny. It's
matters.
It's a good bit, actually.
It is. And she goes, "Oh, I have a beautiful new dress from Paris. I'm just going to iron it." And then she comes out in this behemoth and I was like, that would not fit in either of the suitcases you had with you. And if you think
if you touch that with an iron, the police would come to get you. Yeah.
If you think that all you had to do would be like iron it a little bit to make it recover from whatever stuffing it in a suitcase would do,
cramming it like with a plunger into her suitcase.
I promise you that dress has never been in a box of any kind.
Yeah, no question.
So anyway, that was amusing.
That is funny. I wouldn't have noticed that or anything else about Givenchy.
But now you know how to say it. So.
I said it, people. I'm speaking French. You heard it here first. Let's get into our final thoughts. So the questions, once again, to remind us are, is it worth your time? And how often would you re-watch it? Why don't we start with Justin? Worth your time?
Okay, I'm not really interested in answering either of those questions.
Cool.
But I
That's
guess
good.
I will. Is it worth your time? Sure, it's fine. This is not a bad movie. There is portions of this movie are really smartly written. It's very interesting to me how dialogue heavy, that was a lot of the spectacle you were going to see. I would rewatch this movie, but before I did rewatch this movie again, because it would not be very high on my priority list. And then, with regards to the title of our show, Let the Movie Speak, what is this movie saying? I feel that this movie, at least this version of Sabrina, doesn't really. It can be kind of fun. It can be an enjoyable movie to watch, especially when Humphrey Bogart is not lording over tiny Audrey Hepburn and saying it's all in the family and kissing her. That maybe is not so great. I think the movie doesn't really answer or even care to tell us what love is, and by no means is this the only movie then or now that is a unique issue with. I do think it's a missed opportunity where, during World War II era movies and even after in It's a Wonderful Life, we got a little bit of respite, in my view, at least in American cinema, from love being simply, this is how I feel great. I get the warm and fuzzies when I'm around this person. Therefore, I'm in love. And in World War II, even with Humphrey Bogart again, in Casablanca, you get love as sacrifice. That it is more important to, you can show love for someone by sacrificing the very thing that you want for yourself. Or in It's a Wonderful Life, love being how much you pour into your community, and love being understood in a different way than just what do I get out of it and how do I feel. And since this movie is trying to give us this kind of picture of love that it doesn't matter how many years, Humphrey Bogart, you're 400 years older than me, but I still love you, Methuselah. It's just harder to buy that when I don't really understand, except on a very surface level, what that love is. Again, that is not unique just to this movie, so I don't want to be too unfair or critical to it, but especially given some of the specific subject matter, I think it is a little bit of a missed opportunity, and that is my take.
Okay, I'm going to go next and give Andy the honor of talking some sense into us to finish this thing out. I agree the love stuff is trite. So I would say, yes, it's worth your time for the comedy stuff alone. Like, this is just directed and like filmed and acted, especially in those comedic moments, with like just top-notch like skill and talent. And Billy Wilder's, I think he's a crazy person. Like, I think he's one of those like workman-like but sort of perfectionist directors who, whether he's making Sunset Boulevard, which is really ethereal and more of a like noir pastiche kind of thing, or this, which is none of those things. It's like a total romantic comedy. I think the one thing it has to say, to answer that question, Justin reminded me that we were supposed to answer that question. I think the one thing it has to say that stuck with me that I think is totally worth people's time is about class, and it really comes from the chauffeur. It comes from the dad, right? He has that one line that comes back the second time, I think, out of Audrey Hepburn's lips, if I'm not mistaken. There's a seat in the back, there's a seat in the front, and there's a window in between. And I feel like you just get enough of a snapshot with that guy, right? Where he's like this ping pong ball, like just sort of, he's being acted upon, but he just can't do much, you know? He's sort of stuck letting his daughter get mixed up in this drama that may or may not be good for her in the end. And he just, you know, he has to have that moment where he tells Humphrey Bogart, like, I wish you wouldn't keep having me drive you to these things, right? So that character and her kind of car ride with him at the end, the fact that she gets on the boat, I think is huge, right? We're talking about like proof that she does come of age, or like she does grow into something more, possessing more agency or independence. She was going whether or not anyone got on the boat with her. And I think that matters in the final moments, because she has that conversation with her dad on the way to the boat where she says there's a seat in the back, a seat in the front, and the window in the middle. So I think that's worth the price of admission with the slapstick stuff, which really made me laugh. But I don't think I'd rewatch this like super often. It's not, to me, like top tier rewatchable, Thin Man level, like, oh, it happened one night, Thin Man. Those are like the kind of screwball kind of things that I could watch anytime and be super happy with them. This isn't that rewatchable, but I think it's good. Annie, tell us why it's creepy and we should never watch it again.
Well, yeah, it is creepy. I mean, excuse me, there are creepy scenes. I think,
family.
Yeah, so gross.
We're gonna say it
like
16 more times.
Kiss me, kiss my brother. Who cares? It's all the family. It's gross. You know, and then there's the, you know, suicide as comedy, which I just can't.
That's also gross.
I just can't. You know, like I can't. Even though there's never any real risk to her life.
Yeah.
I just can't. And I think it's telling that they cut that whole thing when they remade this
They were
in the
like,
90s.
we better not touch that
Yeah,
part.
it's like, let's not do that.
Well, you think how, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, please do.
In the 90s, that would play, like, that would not play
No.
at all.
Oh, no.
You know what I mean? Post, like, several movies that have come out from that time that, like, legit deal with the consequences and process of somebody committing or considering committing suicide. Like, I don't think anyone in the 90s would have been ready for, like, she's trying to kill herself, you know?
Do you guys think there's any example post Princess Bride of something like that trying to be played, if not directly for comedy, then leading up to something that is directly comedic?
You talking about when she throws herself down the hill? And
No. When she's going to stab herself and he's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be a terrible waste.
Yeah,
That's a great line.
It is a very
Such
good
a good
line.
She also throws herself down the hill.
But
right?
that's to save him.
That's to save him. But she could have died.
Oh, my dear sweet Wesley, what have I done?
Oh, I just showed that to my kids for the first time the other
So
week.
good.
Oh man, they were loving it. I don't know, Justin. That's a great question. You know, I think Rob Reiner may be the only one who can get away with that.
Well, you see it in animation all the time, right?
That's
like
true.
even in South Park, like the Killing Kenny or whatever.
Yeah.
But then again, it's animation where
Yeah.
Right.
you know, no matter how much the coyote falls off the cliff, he gets back up again.
Yeah, you're right. It's a tough sell. I'm
Yeah.
with you. It's a tough sell.
To be honest, I came into this conversation just being like, nobody should watch this movie. Like, this movie is all about creepers and grooming and, you know, just, and you know, I'm not completely wrong. But having talked with you guys, I've kind of come around a little bit on that this does some things really well. And so I guess I would recommend it with a huge, massive cartload of disclaimers,
That's fair.
which is like, these things are in here, and if you fast forward or ignore them or just, you know,
If you get rid of that one line, I think it makes quite a heap of difference.
if you get rid of the suicide scene
Yeah.
and you get rid of the like, yeah, the
It's
all in the family
and the repetition
line,
of it is really the mistake.
it gets better. I'm not going to say it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I really resonated, Justin, with what you were saying about just the total lack of love in this
Yeah.
movie. Because even when, you know, he shows up on the boat at the end, it's like,
But he flips up the brim of his, or flips down the
Yeah,
brim. Flips
no.
up, flips down. Flips it down.
Down.
That's the Paris one. Down
Yeah.
is Paris.
You know, I don't actually believe these two love each other. Like, like they have. There's nothing in their interaction has made me think that there's love there. And so, you know, whatever. But I don't think they care. I don't think that's the point.
Okay.
And I would recommend this, but with a truckload of caveats. what I want to do now is I want to go watch that 90s version again.
Yeah.
I think it's been a long time since I watched that movie, but what I remember of it is actually Greg Kinnear.
I love Greg Kinnear.
And I think he does something different, slightly different with the David character, which is you kind of love him.
Okay,
Like,
he's not just a
He's
creepo.
Greg Kinnear.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
when Julia Armand is in love with Greg Kinnear, like you understand why.
Like, I'm in love with Greg
Exactly. And so, yeah, he's still a playboy. He still has a bunch of failed marriages. Like the facts of him haven't changed. But
But he doesn't literally walk by her and go, "Oh, hey," and then keep going with a bottle of champagne.
there is one line I really, really like where he makes some comment like, "I couldn't see you for the tree." And
Oh, that's funny.
It's a really good line because she's
She's in a tree.
in a tree.
Yeah. That's good.
So yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to go watch the 90s version again.
Before we go, there's just one little snippet I'd like to share. It's a rumor, and I don't think there's any way to substantiate this one way or the other. But as you guys may be aware, Gregory Peck was in the running and originally offered to play the role of Linus.
I read Cary Grant, but Gregory Peck's interesting too. He's old too, though, isn't he?
But isn't
Yeah.
that the point?
Okay, interesting.
Right. Supposedly, the reason that Gregory Peck turned down the role of Linus Larrabee was because he refused to carry an umbrella.
That's amazing.
I did read that. I didn't remember it was Gregory Peck, but I did read that somebody turned it down because he refused.
Oh, was it? Oh, it could have been Cary
I
Grant.
think it was
am
Cary
just
Grant.
I'm just a simple man. It
But-
could have been
And
Cary
I don't
Grant.
understand.
It
Like,
doesn't matter who it is. Sometimes
There's-
you just got to stick to your principles.
There's
you got to
some-
stick to your guns.
there was some assumption that umbrellas were feminine,
Very cool.
and I don't understand that.
That's
Very cool.
very
Yeah,
cool.
that's the correct response.
umbrellas are feminine because I know a lot about fashion, as I've proven from this episode. All right, folks. Thank you so much, Annie, for joining us again.
Of course.
Thank you.
This was super fun, and I'm sorry we made you watch Humphrey Bogart kiss Audrey Hepburn and say it's all in the family. It's all in the family. It's all in the family. Justin, next week we have Godzilla. 1951's Godzilla. Yeah. So
Coming.
it's going to be fun.
Yep.
Yep. I guess we'll see you next week then.
It's all in the family.
It's all in the family. It's all in the family.
Let the movie speak.
How are we going to make sure that all the fragments have been removed?
Very simple. We will reconstruct the 2 champagne glasses.
Oh!
Now, I cannot possibly be hurting you. The area has been completely anesthetized.
It's not you, it's that song. Oh.